Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Magedhi Rudrayatte Takshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we begin today with verses 42 and 43 in chapter 2. But just to back up a little bit, we saw in verse 39, Krishna said, O Partha, the wisdom of self-knowledge has been taught to you. Now listen to this wisdom related to yoga, acquiring which you will destroy the bondage of karma. So this word wisdom or knowledge, the word that is used in the Gita is buddhi. It's a very key word, very important word. And so up to verse 39, we saw that in that portion of the second chapter, Krishna gave the nature of the self. The Atman is indestructible, is birthless, deathless, weapons cannot cut it, water cannot wet it, it's pure and perfect and free. That's the nature of the Atman. And the limitation of language is such that when we are trying to describe the Atman, we sometimes use the third person pronoun. It is birthless, it is deathless. So it's good to remember that when we read that section of the second chapter, it's not a description of something called the Atman. It's a description of who I am. And so every time the word Atman comes there or the self comes there, we can feel comfortable replacing it with I. And how it will read then may be rather strange, because it would mean I am indestructible, I am birthless and deathless, I am pure and perfect. And we read something like that and we say, no, that's not how I feel now. I don't feel I am birthless and deathless. But so Krishna is saying, that is who I am. And our present experience is, because Krishna is saying it, because we trust the wisdom of the Gita, we can say is, I accept it, but that's not how I feel right now. So sometimes they say that there are 2 or 3 kinds of obstacles in spiritual life. The first is doubts regarding the pramana. Pramana means the source of knowledge. And the source of knowledge could be like book like the Gita or the scripture. So when a person first approaches the text, they may not come with this thing, oh, what the Gita is saying is truth. What Krishna is saying is truth. They may be like, okay, I'm going to read this book, see if it makes sense. But there is always this lingering doubt. How do I know whether this is truth or not? Not everybody comes ready with that full faith in the scripture. And so the first obstacle is acquiring at least the enough faith to say that this could contain the truth. Because we might say, well, before studying it, before testing it, how can I just say this has the truth in it? But am I willing to grant that at least the possibility that this could have truth in it? Because if straight away I begin with this skepticism, this is all nonsense, it never makes, it's all bookish stuff, then of course I'm never going to get anything out of it. So what they say is that the first hurdle in spiritual life is acquiring at least this basic trust, accepting that there could be truth in it. The second obstacle, so these whole obstacles are called asambhavana, the kind of impossibility. Can a book have this transcendent truth? The second obstacle is, does it make sense that this, if you look at it philosophically, this self is infinite and pure and perfect, and okay, do I have to just accept it because the book says so? What is the evidence? What is the proof? So questions regarding prameya, the object of knowledge. And so a deep reflection sometimes is able to answer many of the questions we have regarding God, regarding self. And oftentimes, if we apply the power of reason well enough, many of these doubts and questions are answered. So there is enough intellectual understanding, gives us enough certitude, enough confidence that, yes, it is intellectually I find it satisfying. Now, just because intellectually something is satisfying doesn't necessarily mean that I'm experiencing it right away. Because sometimes one might say, after thinking about it, I have no doubt at the intellectual level that my identity is not limited only to the body and mind, that there is a deeper truth within me. Intellectually, I'm satisfied. But as I go about my day-to-day life, I'm still tied to the body and mind. So intellectual understanding itself is never enough. And there is this, therefore, a more deeper, a more sinister, if you like, hurdle. And that they call viparita bhavana, the contrary experience. So something, my intellect tells me something, but it doesn't match my lived experience. Now, if I have to now transform my intellectual understanding into actual experience, I have to do something about it. And that's essentially what the Gita is now doing. So the knowledge about the self has been given. That's what Krishna says. The wisdom of self-knowledge has been taught to you, up to verse 39. Now, how to make that knowledge a lived experience? That it shouldn't remain simply at the intellectual level, but something that I experience directly. Now, what does experiencing directly mean? As simple as I'm experiencing right now directly that I'm a human being. There is no any even intellectual doubt. Am I a dog or a cat, or am I a piano or a chair? No, I'm a human being. And it's not simply an intellectual thing, it's actually my lived experience. I don't need to look in a book to find out who I am, because I know I'm a human being. And that certitude comes because that's my experience. Now, at present, that kind of experience that I'm this infinite self hasn't come. That's the difference. So how do I now, the kind of certainty I have that I'm a human being, how can I change that into acquiring the equal certainty, or perhaps a greater certainty, that I'm really a divine being? And that's what he says now. Now listen to the wisdom related to yoga, acquiring which you will destroy the bondage of karma. And then you go to verse 40. He said, there is neither any wasted effort nor contrary result. Even a little bit of this practice saves a person from great fear. And then in the verse 41, he's coming to that wisdom that he has given up to this point, and the wisdom that will be needed to put this into practice. The word that is used here is vyavasayatmika buddhi. Buddhi is that knowledge or wisdom. Vyavasayatmika, it's that discerning wisdom, discerning knowledge. And that's the key point here. that as human beings, we were born with a mind. We have the power to feel, we have the power to think. But we know that while these powers exist in our mind, not everyone can feel to the same extent. Some people are more sensitive to feelings, some people are less sensitive. Same thing with regard to thinking. Some people are able to think more deeply, some people are not able to do so. So the ability to think, ability to feel is present in us, but it may not have manifested, may not have developed to equal measure in every person. And therefore, what does this developing the power of wisdom mean? And I briefly referred to it in our last class, and that is that the buddhi, the ability to understand that we all have, is present, but it's not, its full capacity has not been opened yet. Sometimes there are some computer games or there is some software which can really do a lot. But oftentimes they'll have, you just buy a software and then they say, oh, these are the things you can do. But there are certain advanced features that that software has. And if you want those advanced features, they are present. That code is already there. But if you want it, then they say, usually they'll say, pay something more or subscribe. And so then those features which are already present become available to you. It's a very crude analogy, but that's essentially how it is. The full features of the buddhi are already present in our heart. But just out of the box, only a few features are available. And we say, I want those advanced features in my buddhi. And then the first prayer I referred to last time was the Gayatri prayer. That the Gayatri prayer is in a way nothing but a prayer to unlock the higher, the advanced features in my own buddhi. That's why the word that comes toward the end of that prayer, Dhiyo Yonav Prachodayat, Dhi, the word buddhi, Dhi, they all come from the same root. So that Dhi that is referred to in that Gayatri prayer refers to this buddhi which has opened up, which has all these hidden features which were locked, has been opened up. And so when that Dhi opens up within us, then our ability to understand becomes way, way higher, deeper. And until that Dhi opens up, we won't be able to understand the deeper layers of any text that we study. Even in order to experience the presence of the divine in our heart, that Dhi has to open up. So with this ordinary intellect that we have, we can make some headway, a little bit of intellectual understanding, but then we kind of hit the stone wall. In a software, you hit the paywall. You hear a different kind of a wall. And say, the only way, therefore, and that's why our scriptures say, follow dharma. Live honestly, truthfully, doing the right thing, not hurting anyone, being selfless. If one lives like that, resolutely, that's the way then that buddhi begins to open up. So a strong ethical, moral life is an absolute must. It's not optional. If I want, otherwise a little bit of buddhi will remain. But if I want to open it up fully, I will have to live with certain values and principles in life. One cannot be flexible with everything. There has to be, one can ask oneself, yes, it's good to be flexible. It's good to have the power to adjust with people around us. But are there any limits to my flexibility? Am I willing to change everything about my life? Or there are certain things in my life which are so sacred, so important for me, that under no circumstances I'm going to compromise with it? Is there anything in my life which I can say, I will never compromise with this? And we need at least something, because that is where dharma is. That is where truth is. If even truth can be compromised, then we can forget about spiritual life. And so that is this Vyavasayatmika Buddhi. And in verse 41, which we saw last week, Krishna says, in this path, the discerning knowledge, that Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, that dhi, is one-pointed. The thinking of the undiscerning is many-branched and endless. Now that same theme continues, because it's the buddhi that is the key thing going forward in the Gita. If we have to understand what the Gita is saying correctly, because only if we understand it correctly, we'll be able to apply it properly. And if we apply it properly, it will give us the results that we hope it will give. If we don't understand it, our application is going to be wrong, and then we're just going to wonder. It's a little bit like, and there's a story they often say, that a few people who had drunk a lot, and now they say, let's get into the boat and row across the river, because they wanted to go to the other side. And so whole night they rowed, and next morning they found they're still where they were. They had not moved even an inch. And then they found they had forgotten to lift the anchor. The boat was tied to the shore, and so their rowing was totally useless. And sometimes we might discover something like that in our own lives. That it's not that we don't work hard. We might be doing a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of study, reading many books, and how disappointing it can be that in spite of doing all this, I haven't moved anywhere. I'm just where I was. And then that time to see whether my boat has been tied somewhere. And we find all these attachments and strings that we have, they could be the reason why my rowing, I'm just rowing in one place and nothing is moving ahead. And all that will be clarified in the verses ahead. So let's look at verse 42 and 43. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitaha vedavadaratah partha nanyadastiti vadinaha kamatmana swargapara janma karma phalapradam kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishwarya gatim prati. O Partha, those who rejoice in the karma-related words of the Vedas and assert that there is nothing else apart from heavenly rewards, who are filled with desire and seek heaven as the highest goal, such undiscerning people engage in the flowery talk about the various activities that seem to lead to enjoyment and power, but really to rebirth as a result of action. So there is a lot to unpack here. So the earlier verse said, what is the discerning knowledge? Vyavasayatmika buddhi. A buddhi that is one-pointed. And here one-pointed, he means pointed at what? Pointed at the ultimate goal. And so sometimes they define this buddhi as moksha vishayini buddhi, a buddhi that is focused on moksha, focused on freedom, focused on liberation. Now, it cannot be focused on freedom if we don't experience the bondage. It's a little bit like, if I have to get out of a burning house, I must first know that the house is burning. If I'm blissfully sleeping in my room and my house is burning somewhere and I'm not even aware of it, why would I even want to get out of it? So if I want to get out of a burning house, the first requirement is to know that it is burning and to know that I'm not going to be able to put out that fire. And the only way is, how can I get out of it? That's the experience of someone who has looked deep into life. Now, we might say this is a very pessimistic talk. There is such wonderful, positive things in life. Then to just call it a burning house seems unfair. And maybe in one level, yes. But think about it. Life is not fair at many different levels. But just think about the total uncertainty of life. That we have no idea. We have plans for what to do with our life, but we have no idea what exactly is going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Yes, we have the weather forecast, and usually it seems to work okay. We have all these plans for next year, 10 years, 20 years from now. We have no idea. Life potentially can end any moment. And so, it is a kind of a burning house, if we think about it. And if we don't think about it, then we just think about many other things. But if we think about it, then we say that now, what is the answer? The answer is not to just sit in a corner and say, oh, what's the point? Life is going to end someday. That's not going to solve the problem. But if we can acknowledge that among all the wonderful things in life, this is one reality which is not so wonderful. Is there anything I can do about it? And there are some people, or probably a majority of the people, it's not that nobody thinks about it. Of course, as grown up, as adults, we are aware of what life is, what death is. Things get destroyed, things end. It's not that we don't know it. But a lot of people just say, well, that's life. There's nothing we can do about it. Sometimes there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Now, if we say like that, then we just accept it as it is and then try to do the best we can. But then there are a few brave souls who say, no, don't give up. There is something you can do about it. And what the Gita is telling us is that the situation is not as hopeless as you might think. That you can solve this problem. Now, if nobody before us had solved the problem, then we can still be skeptical and say, who knows whether it's right or wrong. The good news is that a lot of people before us have solved the problem. It is to solve this problem that the Buddha, who was a prince, who in a general sort of way lacked nothing. He had no worries of any kind. But he just left everything because he had kind of understood that this is one problem. This thing is defective. And I want to find a way out of it. And he found it. So have his great people, brave souls, courageous ones, not cowards. They have fought for it in every generation, in every country, in every religious tradition. There have been people who have found a way out, which gives us hope. That yes, there have been people before me who have found the way out of this. And none of them has said, no hope for you guys. We have found it, just worship us and be happy. None of them. Every one of them said, we did it, you can do it too. Now, the question is, I have to look within and ask if I can convince myself that I can do it. That's essentially what is being said here. So let's look at it. Now, those people who give up the struggle, who feel that now it's not something, there are more interesting things to do than to find a way to get out of this samsara. It's about them that Krishna is speaking of here in verse 42 and 43. He says, Partha, those who rejoice in the karma-related words of the Vedas. So, Vedas are a huge repository of wisdom. And there are probably the majority of the texts in the Vedas related to karma, related to the karma and the results of karma. Do this action, do this ritual, do this thing, you'll go to heaven, you'll get this. If you want this, you need to do this. There's a lot of actions and the results of action described there. And then only towards the end of the Vedas, end of each of these 4 books of the Vedas, there are these philosophical texts called the Upanishads. There they speak about the way beyond karma and beyond the results of karma. But if you look at the physical extent or the quantification of the text themselves, the Upanishads are a very small portion of the Vedic literature. So if we simply just go by the extent of the teaching, one might say this karma-related thing seems to be more important because like almost 95% of the Vedas are dealing with it. And only this little bit towards the end, they're speaking about the idea beyond karma. And so there are people, therefore, who rejoice in the words of the Vedas, but rejoice in this karma-related word. By the way, because the Upanishads come towards the end of each of the Vedas, the word in Sanskrit for end is called anta, or essence also anta. So when you say Vedanta, it means which comes toward the end of the Vedas. So one way of understanding the word Veda is that the philosophical portion, the truth that beyond this duality of karma and its results, it comes toward the end of the Vedas. So Vedanta means the Upanishads. So those who rejoice in the karma-related words of the Vedas and assert that there is nothing else apart from heavenly rewards. Because again, a lot of the Vedas deal with it, and people say, that's all, what else can we do? We know that you do good things, you get good results. Keep on doing good, get good results, be happy. That's all that there is in life. So people who assert there is nothing else and the goal of life is to go to heaven, and heavens are described, and hells are described also in these books. So heavens, all the joys and the glories and the celestial dancers, the apsaras and Gandharva, celestial musician. It's wonderful. You just read and you feel tempted. Well, it will be great to be there. People are tempted to go to Hawaii and Bahamas. Heaven is like 1,000,000 Hawaiis and Bahamas put together. So, of course, people would be tempted to go there. And so those who believe that there is nothing else apart from heavenly rewards, who are filled with desire and seek heaven as the highest goal, such undiscerning people, undiscerning means people who have not thought over things deeply, speak or engage in the flowery talk. Flowery because it's sweet. It's a little bit like, you see, Vedanta sometimes doesn't appear like a very flowery, sweet talk. I mean, just think about it. The number of times I bring up death and uncertainty of life. It's not a very pleasant topic, and I just feel bad about it. But what to do? That's reality. But if somebody says, oh, don't worry about death, just be happy, nothing to worry, and that is like, oh. So sometimes they say what people want is comfortable religion. A religion that which makes them think what you're doing so far is wonderful, keep on doing it, and everything is going to be fine, not to worry. That's the kind of a talk we like to hear. But like, no, that's not right. Stop thinking about the self. Think about the people. Don't get attached. Not very sweet talk. That's why they say the flowery talk about the various activities that seem to lead to enjoyment and power, because that's what most people want, enjoyment and power. And they say doing this will give you power, Aishwarya, Bhoga and Aishwarya. So this is what they'll give you. But in reality, Krishna says it really just leads to rebirth. And rebirth means, if nothing else, having to go to school again and do all those assignments again. So at least that could be enough of an incentive to say, I don't want to come back again. And so this is an important thing to remember. What kind of a buddhi, what kind of an intellect I'm bringing to the table when I study the Gita, try to understand the Gita. And that's what will be discussed. Look at verse 44. Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya aparita chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhihi samadhau na vidhiyate. The unwavering knowledge or the discerning knowledge does not arise in the minds of those who are devoted to enjoyment and power and whose minds are carried away by various activities. Sometimes we appreciate having many different interests in life because it just seems like just kind of, it's like a musical note. If you just play with one note, after some time it's going to get boring. But if you just have different notes, it's wonderful. So similarly, we find in life, it's good to have multiple interests. You have interest in games and politics and culture and arts, a little bit of spirituality. It's kind of like a full plate filled with different tastes. And that's good. I mean, it's always good to have variety in life. But at some point, we are going to realize that with this variety in life, it brings us some amount of fulfillment, some amount of joy. But if we really want to excel, if we really want to go far ahead in something, then we have to kind of cut down. We can't be like interested in 15 things and expect to become geniuses in all 15 things. That's not possible. There is not enough time and energy to do that. So let's say someone has interest in music as well, which is good. So you perhaps play a musical instrument or a vocal or something. And it's good. But if someone says, I want to become a maestro, I really want to achieve something in the field of music, then just this little bit of practice or riyaz every day is never going to be enough. So if you look at the lives of some of these great musicians who have been such inspiration to generations of people, hours and hours and hours they'll be rehearsing. How much of dedication is involved? How much of sacrifice is involved? Because if you're spending hours dedicated to your passion for music, of course you have no time for politics and games and other things. You are sacrificing a lot, but you're going to move far ahead in this your one field you feel passionate about. And then you kind of achieve something really remarkable in that field. Now, think about spirituality. Many of us see ourselves as spiritual seekers. And yes, we have many interests in life, which is good. And spiritual life does bring certain amount of peace and contentment, and you feel happy and you sleep well and you feel life, more hope in life. And so, great, that's wonderful. But if someone says, no, I'm not just satisfied with this little bit of calmness and peace and good sleep. I want to be free. I don't want to be born again. Then they say, well, then just this 15 minutes of japa in morning and evening, that's not enough in order to be free. You need to then do a little bit more. I mean, even for music or any other interests we have in life, even in secular life, we have to devote hours and hours to do so much. So how can we expect that with just is a little bit of meditation in the morning and a little bit in the evening, I'm just going to become enlightened? We have to be realistic. And so if we want to be free, then somehow this must become the main focus of my life. Now, the question, of course, becomes, then what do I do? There are still a lot of things I need to do in life. I have lots of duties, I have still responsibility. The good news is that unlike the interests in other things, actually spiritual life is in some sense a bit easier. If you want to be a musician, you can't be simultaneously saying, I'm going to go do gardening and then also do my riyaz at the same time. Or I'm going to go shopping and doing riyaz at the same time. Not possible. You have to then do that to the exclusion of every other activity. But spirituality, and listen to this carefully, spirituality is not primarily about doing. Spirituality is about being. And that makes all the difference. Because if it's doing, to do anything, it needs time, it needs place, it needs energy. Even doing as simple a thing as fixing a cup of coffee. Of course, it's going to take some time. Even if you have a good coffee maker, it's going to take a minute or two or three or four. And you have to do something. But just to think, I'm a child of God. You don't do anything. You can do your shopping, you can do your gardening, you can do everything while remaining a child of God. So this doesn't come in conflict with any other activity that we have. Think about it this way. Right now, we always carry with us the knowledge that I'm a human being. And while being human, I'm doing 100 things. I can't say, oh, I can't do other things because I have to think I'm a human being. No, it doesn't interfere with that. So can I just now substitute that instead of thinking I'm simply a human being, can I just change that to think I'm a child of God, I'm a child of mother, and then do other things? And it might raise some questions, because maybe depending on the kind of activities, thoughts, talks I'm engaged in, if I'm mindful, some of the things probably might need change. We might say, is this what a child of God would do? Is this what a child of God would think? Is this how a child of God would speak? So some of our life might get modified a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily come in conflict with all the other things we do in life. And that's why the unwavering knowledge does not arise in the minds of those who are devoted to enjoyment and power. But if all that I seek in my life is enjoyment and power, then whose minds are carried away by various activities, then I cannot acquire that one-pointed knowledge. And if I cannot acquire that one-pointed knowledge, then the wisdom of the Gita cannot become my own. I may not be able to comprehend it even intellectually, what to speak about actually experiencing it in daily life. So there is this one quote of Swami Vivekananda, which is a favorite of mine. Swamiji says in one place, he says, live for an ideal, and that one ideal alone, let it be so grand, so great, that there may be nothing else left in the mind. No time for anything else, no place for anything else. What it means is, if I'm passionate about spiritual life, then it should be with me in some form as often as I can, ideally all the time. And so what we try to do in the beginning is to say, okay, let me at least be immersed in spiritual life, at least in the morning for a few minutes, in the evening a few minutes, and then maybe in the course of the day, try to remember God as often as possible. It's almost like sometimes they have this, I, I'll probably get this word wrong. There is this one form of artwork. I think I'm definitely going to get the word wrong. When you find the word right, you can tell me. I think it's called pointillism or something. There are some paintings where they just kind of go on putting dots. And then in the beginning, it's just dots, collection of dots. But as the density of the dots increases slowly, then this beautiful picture begins to emerge. The whole painting is just nothing but these tiny dots. And so try to find a word for it. There is some word for it. And then next time you can remind me about that. That is essentially what we are trying to do. So when I say that, when I'm trying to think of God, I do a meditation in the morning, meditation in the evening. I'm essentially just putting 2 or 3 dots in my canvas of my life. And then, as often as I try to think of God, I'm adding dots to the picture. The more and more I begin to think of the spiritual ideal, in whichever form that comes naturally to me, I'm adding more dots. And when all those dots come together, a beautiful picture emerges. And so that is what this verse 44 says. The unwavering knowledge does not arise in the minds of those who are devoted to enjoyment and power. And so that is what, to understand it in the positive way, that I have to see, yes, enjoyment has a place in life. Power, in one way or the other, every one of us exercises to different extents in our lives. But if that is all that I seek in life, then spiritual life is not for me. Our minds are carried away by various activities. If I keep on getting distracted by 100 other things, so concentration is absolutely necessary for any progress. So we will stop here today. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions.
Hari Om Swamiji. Swamiji, we know of divine beings such as Buddha and Sri Ramakrishna who were brave enough to solve the problem of the samsara. Are there people who were able to solve this problem by being more immersed in the secular life?
No. It just depends on what you mean by more immersed in secular life. Everyone is in secular life, because someone asked Swami Brahmananda once that how to give up the world. And he said, no, you cannot give up the world. Whether we like it or not, we are in the world. Now, being in the world is not so much a problem. The problem is the world being in me. Because it's like a boat. A boat is in a water. And that's the right place for the boat to be. A boat on the land is totally useless. So, a boat in water is fine. What we don't want is water inside the boat, because then the boat will sink. And so, when people speak about giving up the world, in a literal sense, nobody can give up the world. We are in the world physically, yes. But if my heart is filled with these just material goals, then of course, spiritual breakthrough is not possible. It's the analogy that came to me earlier today actually was this. in a prison system, clearly there are so many things we read about. There are novels, and then there are news reports. There are lots of problems in the prison system, and lot of things that need improvement in a prison system. So think about the prisoners who are there, say, for life without parole. And clearly, many of, not, I don't know, I've never been inside a prison, so I can't say, just my imagination. But I would imagine there are people inside, and they think they have got buddhi too. So clearly, what difficulties or challenges they experience, they would have their own ideas about how things need to be improved. I mean, there's no shortage. Everyone has ideas about how to make things better. So even some of the prisoners might say, oh, this food is not good, this should be done this way. Or relationship between the prison staff and the prisoners and the inmates, and 100 things they might want to improve. And in itself, not a bad idea. Of course, if they can improve things inside the prison, that's great. What's important? No matter how much improvement they make inside the prison system, all of them are still inside the prison. They are still not free. So it's possible to spend their entire life trying to improve the prison system and just remain bound all through. Or maybe there is someone who is like, yeah, okay, there are others taking care of improving the prison system. Let me try to find how I can get out of this. And if that person kind of strives hard, and there are people who have made some really daring escapes from prison. Think about it that way. So yes, the world is such a mess, and definitely there is a lot of improvement that can be done. And there are people who are doing it. And we need people to do it. But everyone can ask that question to myself. There are a lot of people doing it. Maybe I should try to do something else. And one of something else would be how we can just totally become free from this mess. So that's one of the ways to think about doing good to the world, improving the world, and just getting out of the world. Take it for what it's worth, but that's one of the thoughts that came to my mind. Yeah. Any other thought? Yeah.
Swamiji, I'm trying to understand what Arjuna was thinking and how Krishna was helping, because all this in my heart, in my mind. So I feel that Arjuna has knowledge, but he surrendered himself to Krishna to follow. So what I have to do, the strong faith and surrender. As you said, that spiritual life is being, not doing. So my japa has to be being, not because now it's activity. So how I fully surrender myself, so my japa become being.
Yes. So the idea is, when I say spiritual life is not doing, doesn't mean that doing is unnecessary. What I mean is that we do things in spiritual life in order to be. So, for instance, what can be helpful? Suppose someone is meditating on the Holy Mother. And so it's not enough to just say, okay, Holy Mother, that's the mother's picture in front of me. This is the mantra. I'm just going to go on repeating it. But on the other hand, if someone says, I'm a child of mother. She is my mother, I'm a child. And do the same thing. You're doing something, but you're doing something with fully aware of the idea, I'm her child. I'm a child remembering my mother. Or I'm the Atman thinking about the Supreme Atman. So holding on to an identity So that's what being part of it is. So we have to do, but whatever I do must help me to be. That's the idea. So doing is important. I'm not belittling the importance of doing. All that I'm saying is doing requires time. That's why we can't say, oh, 24 hours, just sit and do japa. We can't. There are other things to do. So yes, the actual time I do japa and meditation may be limited. But even when I get up from my meditation seat, I don't stop being a child of mother. Then I go, I fix myself a cup of coffee, I drink coffee. I'm like a child of mother is drinking coffee. A child of mother is now going and shopping. So I can be all the time, while my doing will be limited. That's the idea. Okay, so we will stop here today. And next week we'll begin with verse 45. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu.